Good morning and welcome to the OHE Public Engagement Call. This is our final call for the year. I want to introduce our Deputy Commissioner, Winnie Sullivan. She'll be opening the call for us this morning. Winnie, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Sure. Thanks, Marcio. Good morning. Welcome to the Office of Higher Education Public Engagement event. My name is Winnie Sullivan, and I am the Deputy Commissioner for OHE. On behalf of Commissioner Olson and the entire senior leadership team, I would like to thank you all for coming and joining us today. I'd also like to thank the public engagement team who continues to work diligently to ensure that these calls happen. They make sure that we have the right panelists and the right topic of discussion every week. Every 2 weeks. So just a big thank you to all of them for all that you do. The purpose of these convenings is to engage with diverse communities to identify barriers in post-secondary education. OHE's intent is to work in collaboration with communities to provide equitable access to information and advice that leads to the pursuit of post-secondary education and/or training for all Minnesotans. Before we start the discussion today, there are just a few updates that I want to share with you. First, I'm excited to announce that these public engagement discussions will continue in 2021. The next event will take place in January, and we will be examining the discussion will be around disparities in education attainment in Minnesota. So stay tuned for more information on our January call. Next is a reminder about the Governor's Executive Order 2099, which states that we are required that certain places of public accommodations to remain closed to the public for a 4-week period. So that period ends December 18th. So it's important that we stay home if we're able during this time, because even though sometimes people with COVID-19 never feel sick, they can still give the disease to others. So as we know, there are a lot of asymptomatic folks out there and who doesn't know. So continue to practice social distancing and wearing your mask, and if possible, working from home or staying home when you don't need to be outside the home. Next, the Minnesota Department of Health announced this week the opening of the newest saliva testing site on Thursday in Worthington, Minnesota. The site will bring the total number of community testing sites to 22 across the state, offering barrier-free COVID-19 tests to anyone who believes they need to be tested. So out of 22 sites, I'm sure you could find one near you. If you need to go get tested, go to the Minnesota Department of Health website and you could locate the site nearest to your home. So today's topic of discussion is adult learners returning to higher education. We've convened a panel of expert higher education advocates, students, and stakeholders to discuss the barriers faced by adult learners in post-secondary education. The panel will also discuss resources available to assist adult learners in navigating the post-secondary landscape. I look forward to this conversation and hearing from the panelists, as well as questions from the audience or comments from the audience about their personal experience on this topic. And with that, we have today's moderator, our very own Meredith Fergus. Meredith is the manager for research and SLES at the Office of Higher Education, and she's also a great colleague. And we're so lucky to have her a part of the team. So Meredith, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Sullivan. I'm excited to be here today. So this is my first time serving on a public engagement panel. So I'm excited that we're able to do this today. And thank you to our panelists for joining us and our attendees. This morning's call is about adult learners returning to higher education, and we do have an expert panel of higher education advocates, students, and stakeholders to talk about the barriers faced by adult learners, and also their resources available. As Deputy Commissioner Sullivan mentioned, I am Meredith Fergus. I am the Manager of Research in the State Longitudinal Education Data System for the Office of Higher Education. But I also work closely with OHE's partners at Minnesota State, Rasmussen, our other colleges, Adult Basic Education, DEED, and the Department of Labor and Industry in the area of adult learner enrollment and completion. I'd like to welcome our panelists today. They have a wide array of perspectives on the experience of adult learners in higher education and the resources available. And so I appreciate you guys taking the time to share that with us today. I am moderating the call. And so we are also going to be joined by Marcio Thompson, OHE's Manager of External Relations, who will be facilitating the open chat. Marcio, did you want to say hi?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Meredith.
Marcio is also going to help me stay on track this morning since this is my first call. Marcio will be asking questions sent via the chat during the call. I'd like to remind everybody that this call is being recorded and to please ask your questions via the chat box. If we're unable to get to your questions, we will be following up after the call and posting the call recording and related content to our public engagement call page on OHE's website following the conclusion of today's call. All right, are you ready? Let's get started. So I'm excited to have the panelists introduce themselves and share a little bit about their experience with adult learners in higher education. You should note that a couple of our panelists, students, will be joining us throughout the call as classes permit. And so we'll have them introduce themselves once they join the call. So first up, we have Shelley Aldrich, the Minnesota Reconnect Program Manager at Minnesota State Colleges and Universities Systems Office. We also have Brooks Doherty, Assistant Vice President of Academic Innovation at Rasmussen College. Amanda Shimmerhorn, did I say that right, Amanda? Okay. She's with Minnesota State Community and Technical College. And Amy Wagner, Academic Advisor with Riverland Community College. Later in the call, we'll be joined by Cindy Rainey, who is a student at Riverland Community College, as well as Ashley Walker, also at Riverland. And thank you, Amy, for coordinating schedules with Cindy and Ashley so they can join us today. All right, so let's start with Shelley. Can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi. Thanks, Meredith. I am Shelley Aldrich, and I work at Minnesota State, and I am the program manager for the Minnesota Reconnect program. And I have been a part of Minnesota State system since 2001. All of those years, I've been working with adult learners in some capacity. And in 2008, I went back to get my master's as an adult learner. So I kind of look at it from both angles, working with the students from the institutional side, but also working as a student and being a student side and perspective. So it's an exciting topic, and I love adult learners and I love working with them. Thanks, Meredith.
Thanks, Shelley. All right, let's move to Brooks.
All right, thank you, Meredith, and thanks everyone for this exciting conversation today. My name is Brooks Doherty. I'm Assistant Vice President of Academic Innovation at Rasmussen College. I've been with Rasmussen since 2006. Started out as a teacher. I have an English background, so I was teaching English for a while. Worked hiring faculty and doing some faculty training. Right now, my main focus in the innovation space is around prior learning assessment, competency-based education, and developmental education. And it's important to note that Rasmussen is primarily an adult learner serving institution. So the average age is 27, 28 years old. And then as you get into our bachelor programs and graduate programs, skews even higher toward 30 and 30 plus. And I'm also an adult learner. So I'm a doctoral student at St. Mary's of Minnesota as well.
Thanks, Brooks. All right, Amanda.
Hello, my name is Amanda Shimmerhorn, and I am a political science student at the MSCTC M State College in Detroit Lakes. I am also an intern for Lead MN. We are working with NCAN this year on a federal advocacy program to try and help with college attainment for everyone. And I actually graduated high school in 2004 and just went back to college here in 2019. So I definitely have a little bit of experience as being an adult learner, and I'm very happy to be here.
Thanks, Amanda. And then we'll finish off with Amy. Amy, you're still on mute. It had to happen sometime, so.
Well, at least it was me doing it. Sorry. So good morning. Thank you, Meredith. I'm Amy Wagner. I work at Riverland Community College as an academic advisor. Riverland is located in Austin, Albert Lea, and Owatonna, Minnesota. I've also been serving as the Minnesota Reconnect navigator for the last 2 years, working with students in the Minnesota Reconnect program, and I'm sure that you'll be hearing more about that program as the day progresses. In my role, working as the navigator, working with adult learners, I've also taken on the responsibility as the student parent club at Riverland. I am the advisor for that. And I also am CPL coordinator, credit for prior learning coordinator, as these are all support services that are integrally involved in helping our adult learners. So I'm excited to be here, excited to have a few of the students that I work with join us in a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. All right, so welcome everybody. The first thing I'd kind of like to talk about is just what do we even mean by adult learner? We tend to throw around terms like adult learner, non-traditional student, working student, independent student. We kind of throw them around interchangeably. So let's clear up, who are we actually talking about when we say adult learner? I know from my perspective, I think of it, by the way, all college students are adults. Let's just lay that out there. But when I use the term adult learner, I'm really talking about individuals age 25 or older. And it's a very simple definition, but that age break is kind of meant to reflect that the majority of individuals at age 25 are entering a period in their life where employment, families, children are their primary focus. Education and training takes a secondary kind of step for many of them. And so there's a lot more involved with trade-offs and balancing life and work and education. And so that's what I mean by it. And so using the age 25 or older definition, of the 370,000 college students that Minnesota currently has, among approximately half, 52% of those are age 25 or older. And as Brooks mentioned, it's definitely skewed towards the graduate student side. So among undergraduates, 1 in 3 students is an adult learner, so 32%. But among graduate students, 93% are age 25 or older. So definitely reinforcing that 1 in 3 undergraduates is age 25 or older. But I'd like to throw that question out to the panelists. We typically talk about adult learners in the undergraduate education context, so pursuing a certificate, diploma, associate degree, or bachelor's degree. But what really comes to mind for you when we talk about adult learners? And Amy, since you were the last one to talk, I kind of want to pitch it to you first.
All right, going to unmute myself before I respond. Adult learners, as you said, 25 and older, that's the age range that we're using. Adult learners to me are those that have not had a recent experience in high school. For the most part, the students that I work with that are adult learners are students who have had some experience at college. It may have been right when they got out of high school. But for whatever reason, they weren't successful. So now they've come back at a different point in their life. They have different challenges than students who are 18, 19, just out of high school. As you mentioned, they have children, they have full-time employment, they have needs to support their family. So their rise in their economic status is very important to them. They are an invested group of people because they know why they're in college and they know what the education is going to mean for them. So they have a different perspective about taking classes, succeeding in classes, and they have different apprehension and different types of fears and anxieties that they bring to being a college student because they're an adult learner.
Thanks, Amy. All right, Amanda, do you want to kind of follow up? I think Amy covered a lot of it, but it'd be good to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with Amy. Part of the reason why I waited so long to go back to school is because I have children. Our oldest just turned 14. We have twins that are 14. So of course that with them being born and them starting school and stuff, that put my education obviously on the back burner. So once we finally felt comfortable enough, that was a big part too, is being able to financially afford being able to go back to school as an adult with other bills and children that are in activities as well. So I think that that is part of being an adult learner too, is that it's not just you getting up and going to school every day, which, not to say obviously college students still have jobs when they're younger, but they don't necessarily have the type of fiscal responsibility outside of the school setting as, say, an adult learner would. So I think that's an important thing to remember as well when talking about adult learners.
Thanks, Amanda. Brooks or Shelley?
Yeah, this is Brooks. I mean, what I'll add, I agree with everything that was stated, and the word experience came up a couple times, and that's what I think of when I think of adult learners. The difference between an 18-year-old and a 25 or a 30-year-old is that experience that you have in your 20s, especially professional experience, life experience. And in addition to the characteristics of the adult learner, what I like to ask myself in working with adult learners is, how can we as an institution honor that experience in the classroom? Because it does, in a lot of cases, count for something, right? That's a big advantage. Adult learners are bringing something skill-wise, experience-wise to the classroom that a more traditional learner of 18 or 19 simply does not possess yet. And how can we design our academic programs and our assessment experiences to really do the best job to honor that experience and give credit wherever it's appropriate?
Thanks, Brooks. Shelley? Hi, Shelley. I think you're still on mute. Oh. I think I've lost Shelley's audio today. So we're going to pause for just a second. Shelley, I'll come back to you. I'd like to welcome Cindy Rainey to our call. Welcome, Cindy. Thanks for joining us. We just got started and we just did some introductions. So would you like to introduce yourself? You could also talk a little bit about, why you're on this call.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, my name is Cindy Rainey. I'm a student at Riverland Community College. I am a mom of 6, and I am studying for the Human Service Program. This is my 3rd semester, so next semester I'll be hopefully graduating if everything goes to plan. Yeah.
Congrats, that's exciting. We started off the conversation by just saying, who is an adult learner? What does that mean to you? So from your perspective, do you even use the term adult learner? That's what I find that people assign it to other people.
So an adult learner for me is just that, being able to, at a later time in your life, be able to come back to the community, into the colleges, and be able to further your education. And whether that be just going for generals or focusing yourself better on something that your goals were, that it's never too late.
Perfect. Thanks, Cindy. All right. Shelley, do you want to wrap us up on this question of what does it mean to be for an adult learner?
I'm sorry, Meredith, I can't hear you.
Oh, can everybody else hear me okay? Thumbs up. All right, Cindy, I'm going to pass you over to Kat and Marcia, our technical experts, to figure that out. All right, Shelley, do you want to wrap us up on this question?
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, because I'm like, my mute was off. I don't know. I feel that everyone was quite thorough. The only thing that sometimes we have had discussion about in kind of defining an adult learner are those students that are independent. And so a 19 or 20-year-old that may have children of their own, and so they don't typically fall into the adult learner age, if you will, because they're not over that 25-year threshold. However, their life experiences have put them into more of a situation where they are faced with more of the barriers that the adult learners that we're talking about may be dealing with. And so for definition wise, when we're trying to group an adult learner into a fancy, nice little package with a bow, we tend to add in the independent financial aid individuals as well. So that's the only other caveat that I would say we'll discuss probably in the future here.
Thanks, Shelley. I think that's an important point because I come from a research perspective, so I'm looking for clear criteria to define adult learners, but it is more about that shared experience and what you're trying to manage in pursuing education. And that's a really important perspective to keep in mind. All right, so I feel like we should always start talking about what the barriers are to adults participating in post-secondary education, which we have to acknowledge there are barriers when you're trying to balance life, work, and I think higher education sometimes tends to default to the recent high school graduate perspective, assuming that everybody is coming directly from high school, which is something we probably should be working on. But what do you guys think? What are the challenges or barriers for adult learners in post-secondary education? Who wants to start?
This is Brooks. I can start if that's okay. Time.
Thanks, Brooks.
Time is a huge barrier. So when you think of the experience responsibilities that we were talking about, right? The full-time job, the kid or kids, sometimes multiple jobs, in addition to trying to improve one's lot in life through education. We're in the middle of a pandemic. You add, distance education on top of that. When American higher education typically is attached to clocks and calendars and due dates, it can make all of those responsibilities a challenge for adult learners. In particular, I would argue for all learners, especially over the last year or 9 months or so, but this has always been a challenge for adult learners. And it's one of the reasons, and we can talk about this later, but one of the reasons why there has been an increased movement to try to create learning and assessment experiences for all learners, but in particular for adult learners that try to move away from being tethered to the clock and calendar and really try to focus on learning and assessment of learning first and foremost. So adult learners who are old enough and mature enough and experienced enough to make some of their time management decisions can really choose, when am I going to submit this assignment? When am I going to engage in this discussion post? So yeah, time I think is a huge barrier and has been for a while.
Is there a specific program or practice at Rasmussen that you guys use to help with time? You mentioned them generally, but is there something specific?
Yeah, competency-based education. So Rasmussen right now has 18 competency-based education programs. We have 3 more coming. And for those uninitiated to competency-based education, what it does essentially is it prioritizes learning and the demonstration of learning over time. So if a student is in a competency-based education course or a program, she can demonstrate, let's say there are 6 competencies in a course. The learner gets to make the choice when she is going to demonstrate those 6. She can do it right away. And then, procrastinate a little bit, especially if you have a lot of stuff going on or a big work project or you're traveling or whatever. Point is, you have to demonstrate every single skill before the end of the term, but you get to choose when that's happening, and you're always engaging with a faculty member along the way. So that time fluidity is conducive to the adult learner experience, and we've had some good success at Rasmussen with it.
Thanks, Brooks. Apologies. Time is definitely top of the list, I would say too. But what else would our other panelists add?
Hi, Meredith, me, Cindy. I would say
Thanks, Cindy.
I always feel my personal aspect in the way I attend college is I am just above that age of that 25 mark. But when it comes to wanting to have that experience and having, the college experience and joining the clubs and things like that, because a lot of the times the adult learners are trying to kind of just going in, doing the classes and, heading home because of like what Brooke said, time. But in the aspect of also wanting to have that experience of being on campus, being involved, I myself am a part of a few clubs. I'm actually a president in a few of them, but it almost becomes a dynamic of where do you fit into the aesthetics of the groups. I'm not yet old enough to be part of what they consider the older adult learners, and not yet for the younger crowd who is, coming out of high school or even took a gap year or whatever to come into college. So finding that footing as far as where we belong is another issue.
That's a great point, because I think when we think about college, we do think not only of the coursework, but the kind of community you're part of, right? Supporting the local sports teams, be it football or hockey, integrating, with those campus social events, making the connections you need to kind of have that peer experience. Yeah, most definitely. That is a great point, Cindy. Amy, were you going to add?
Yeah, I was going to say, well, I will state that Cindy does a really good job of fitting in and kind of finding her footing, and that's really been appreciated from the student parent club to the human services organization. She's done a really great job to make the time to fit into college, but fit into college in her own way and on her own terms, and I think that that's great. I was going to say that one of the barriers that I find is the emotional barriers. And I kind of talked about that a little bit in the beginning. It's very powerful to work with the adult learner especially who's returning. I've had students in tears in my office because of anxiety, fear about starting, shame of not have done it before, not have succeeding the first time. And also tears of really happiness and relief of, hey, I just registered for my first college class coming back. Or I often hear, I'm getting all A's in my classes. And so it really kind of goes from one spectrum to the other. But there is a big barrier initially for adult learners thinking, can I come back to college? Do I belong back in college? How am I going to do this? And then the shame. And I keep trying to reiterate, this is your time. This is a time it's supposed to happen. You are not alone. You are one of many, many, many people who the first time around, it just for whatever reason, wasn't the time that you were supposed to be able to do this. But now you've taken the step and now you're here. And so helping them with whatever those barriers are once they're there is very different than that initial barrier of like, I'm coming back and I'm going to try this.
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, we never really talk about the fact that I don't know of any student, at least in my circle, that had it easy in college, even for those who went right away. Everybody struggles with a class. Everybody struggles with some, do I really fit here, even if you are 19? And so, but for adults, yeah, there is definitely, it feels like a magnification, because we do come in with the presumption that everyone's younger than us. And yes, I walked into those classes and been the oldest student in the room, and it is kind of uncomfortable. Yeah. All right. Amanda, would you add anything?
Yeah, I would just agree with, especially with what Cindy said, because I imagine there's that middle age of like your 20s where you're not quite an older adult, but you're still younger. So I feel like coming back when I did, I tried to time it because, like I said, we have children that their ages vary from 7 to 14. So that's another barrier too, is just being able to have enough time to fit in classes, like Brooke said, and then still be involved in activities. I recently joined our Student Leadership Association, which I'm the vice president of our campus, and that was able to connect me with Lead MN, who I now have a internship with, and I was able to get a federal fellowship spot as well due to that. So had I not taken just the chance to go ahead and just put myself out there, these are opportunities that I might not have even been aware of existed. So I think it's just taking that risk and just realizing that there's other people that are going through the same things that you are. And it's okay to feel like you're too old to be there, because there's someone that feels like they're older than you. There's always going to be someone that feels like, you know, they're older. So it's just really important to remember that you're never too old to go back. You can always just do it.
Shelley, Amanda's point kind of reminds me that we should probably talk about the adult learner experience during COVID. Because not only are you students and workers and moms, but now you're remote learning teachers, right? But before I get to that question, is there anything else you'd add to our list of challenges?
The only thing that I would add would be the true cost of attendance, because so many of the adults, whether they're, 25 or if they're, 45, so many of them are used to having a full-time job. And right now, their goal is to go back to school to hopefully enhance that, or maybe change careers completely. And so the actual cost of attendance for adult learners really can be a lack of the income coming in, because you may need to kind of shift your schedule, and the increase in tuition of now you're maybe not making as much money for your salary, and now you have an expense that you hadn't had previously. And the financial aid package and the financial aid system is truly antiquated and really designed for that double income family, and an 18-year-old who is having a portion of their tuition paid for by that family contribution. So when they're looking at the financial aid for a working adult, it's very difficult to really kind of offset that reduced hours or reduced income and have an increase in expense. So when I say cost of attendance, I don't mean just tuition, but the cost of maybe a reduced income piece as well. So financial barriers.
Thanks, Shelley. That's a great point. And I know you and I have spent a lot of time on this cost issue. Not only is it a matter of how do you mitigate the kind of income loss, but how do you even manage to get through the financial aid process and understand which aid you qualify for and what does that mean? I think a lot of people forget that we actually do offer a number of financial aid programs that can serve adults over 25, but many people self-select out because they think they're not eligible or they're not going to get anything, and they don't want to be burdened with loans. That's a great point. Yeah. I do want to go back to COVID, right? So I think we kind of, sometimes I forget because it's every day now, right? We are normalizing our situation. But I want to start with Amanda and Cindy. How has COVID impacted your college experience as an adult learner? Kind of, is there any specific barriers you want to kind of highlight? And then I'll turn it over to Amy, Shelley, and Brooks to kind of talk about the college-based perspective on serving adult learners during COVID.
I'll go. For me, it's very difficult. It's been quite a bit of a task. In my household, all my 6 children are distant learning. We actually started off the year by them being in school, and then just recently, right before the Thanksgiving break, transitioned over to distant learning for them. For us, we were still on campus, and our instructor gave us the ability kind of, hey, we're going to go and sit down and meet and figure out, are you guys wanting in person? Are you guys okay with us moving to Zoom? I can kind of fight for that. And a lot of students in that classroom, are adult learners or parents. And, for those like myself, it's easier for us to be in class. Because if I am home, I'm worrying about making sure, and I have a schedule listed on my walls for every one of my children as far as like when they have to be on, and it's at different hours. Every 10 minutes I'm making sure that they're on to this class and they're on to that class, and I know I've missed a class because I'm getting notifications left and right on my phone, as far as like your child missed this class, or hey, this appointment is coming up, and then trying to just find time for myself and trying to figure out when do I have time to sit down and do my studies. Unfortunately, this semester I had to just drop a class, one of my classes, because it just became overwhelming. That one class got moved to online completely, and never have I ever, in semesters that I have been in class, was that ever an option for me. And so having to do so emotionally was very hard, kind of feeling a failure loss there, feeling a bit overwhelmed, but the reality of knowing when I could and couldn't stretch myself anymore. My nights have become longer, putting the kids to bed and finally being able to sit down in front of a computer and do my own work. So COVID really has put a hindrance in my family because I still have to make time for their learning, for our daily needs as far as food and making sure the house is up, and finding some time to make sure that we all emotionally distress, and figure out how we can be able to be mentally healthy as well through all of this.
Thanks, Cindy. Amanda, what would you add?
Yeah, I completely agree with what you say. I feel that if my classes were not online and they were in person, it would be much more beneficial to myself. But with I only have 4 kids home doing distance learning. They are pretty spread out, so it's like middle school and then elementary. So it's just finding the balance and making sure we have enough internet. We don't live in town, so we live in a rural setting. So having the bandwidth for everyone to be on a Google Meets or on Zoom for class has been really difficult as well. I find myself getting up, at like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning so that I can get extra cleaning done, or so that I can get my work done as well, because the only way that I can afford to continue going to school is if I keep up so many credits so that I can get the Pell Grant in order to be able to afford to go to school and pay bills. And then with COVID and everything, my husband's hours have been cut as well. So I went from not having to take out student loans to heavily relying on student loans, which is the exact opposite of what I wanted to do. So it's a financial burden. It causes a lot of anxiety, and then you feel bad because you don't want to carry that over into your daily family life. But when you're all under the same roof at the same time, there's really nowhere else for you to outlet that frustration. So it can definitely lead to many, 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 many sleepless nights, I must say. Yes.
Thanks, Amanda. I can't even imagine how you manage it, how you and Cindy manage it. It's amazing that you do. Yeah. Shelley, Brooks, or Amy, what would you add? How is COVID kind of impacting how you serve your students?
Well, we've certainly been immersed in technology, and wish I had some stock in Zoom before this all started, because we've really come to rely on Zoom technology for virtual meetings. We had to switch over our technology literally like within a day in the middle of March when we were sent home. And we were pretty much up and running in a day. So what's difficult about COVID is the lack of the actual in-person time to meet with the student, because that's just more personal. But having virtual appointments where you can see the other person is a really good second best thing. And having to do your regular advising work, but then also be the liaison between the student and the college, and this is how this policy is going to change, and this is what this resource is, and it's just added a lot more complexity to the things that the students have to deal with, and we're there to help them with that complexity. So sometimes we're spending more time on COVID related solving problems than maybe what we would normally be doing in our academic advising roles.
Yeah, at Rasmussen, we've had an adjustment, but perhaps less of an adjustment than a lot of institutions have. Pre-pandemic, we had been doing online education for close to 20 years and already had an infrastructure and experience for doing it. So to that extent, that really wasn't an adjustment for us. The big adjustment has been, we have a robust nursing program, and a lot of the in-person clinicals and labs that are really necessary for our nursing and healthcare programs obviously were disrupted. And so those have either had been delayed. We've been looking at some virtual opportunities, especially for anatomy and physiology, if we can do labs virtually. And we've had some success there. But yeah, a lot of our disruption has been pretty minimal compared to what a lot of institutions have had to experience. I will say on a positive note that we have seen some pretty positive student outcomes and student behaviors since this hit. While acknowledging that it has not been easy for anything, we have seen, I think, a lot of students, given that their ability to grasp and control their time is different, right? It's not better. In a lot of cases, it's worse, but time management is just changing. And I think with more people home, we're seeing more students doing their doing their work earlier. And we've seen really good work from the students over the last 3 quarters or so. Again, acknowledging that it hasn't been easy, but the results have been great. So for all the students out there who are putting in the work and enduring all this stress and still seeing really good results is really encouraging.
Great. Thanks, Brooks. Shelley, I'd like to have you wrap up on this question, and then Ashley has joined us. So after you're done, we're gonna go over to Ashley. So how would you wrap us up on this one?
I would wrap up with the positives as well. I was glad to hear Brooks state, like, well, I'll talk about some positives. I've been extremely impressed with how Minnesota State has addressed a lot of the issues that COVID caused. And like Amy had talked about, like, that pivot happened very quickly. And for Minnesota State, sometimes things don't move that fast. And this just kind of proved that we actually can make changes and make those changes happen in a positive way really quickly. And some of those were, shifting things that used to obviously happen on campus, a virtual setting, and making them still effective and personalized for the students. So orientations and registration sessions. A lot of our institutions created more access to the individuals. So by having virtual meetings, some of our advisors were able to work, later on into the evening when campuses prior to COVID would close at 4:30, and like that was when student services kind of shut. COVID kind of adjusted and made more access to a lot of our student services on the campuses. So that was exciting. A lot of the campuses realized, I think it was Amanda kind of had addressed the technology issue and like the broadband and things like that. And a lot of the campuses took that on. And so they expanded Wi-Fi into their parking lots or into a farther reaching area as opposed to just, on campus, like in the physical building, because now that's not accessible for students. And just as a professional development option, the COVID issue and having everything be virtual has really allowed anyone who works with students and adult learners and is interested in professional development. I have been able to attend many more conferences and trainings that would have cost thousands and thousands of dollars and would have overlapped time-wise, and I wouldn't have access to those had they not been virtual. So I was able to attend conferences that would have been taking place in DC and in California and in Denver, and on a regular state budget, that's not doable for one employee. There's no way that we would ever spend that amount on professional development and travel funds. But because of, these conferences being virtual, I've had access to a lot of them, and there have been weeks where I've literally attended 3 different professional development conferences. And for me, having that experience so that I can share that and spread that on to the students and the stakeholders that I work with has been a huge benefit of COVID. And it just makes me realize that all of us working in higher ed really can be creative, and we can solve these problems. And when forced to make change, we can do that quickly. And so it's exciting to see that we can do this and have the momentum. And now that we've done it, I think we can do it even faster in the future. So that's me so far.
Thanks, Shelley. I appreciate the positive. All right, we're going to jump over to Ashley Walker. Welcome, Ashley. You're kind of jumping into the middle of our conversation here, but no worries. We've kind of talked a little bit about what it means to be an adult learner, kind of what are the challenges or barriers, and how COVID has impacted us. So I'll kind of let you take it where you want to go, but go ahead and feel free to introduce yourself and add your take on the conversation.
Hello, my name is Ashley. I am a student here at Riverland Community College. I started going back to college in spring 2020, so not too long ago. I graduated high school in 2009 and did take a couple semesters after high school, but then went to work full-time until now. So I am a full-time student and a mom of one and have another one on the way. It has been a different experience from my first experience in college for sure. I believe I'm more focused because I know exactly what I want. But there are some challenges as far as time is a big one with the little, I have a 1.5-year-old daughter, and she takes up most of my time, especially when she's home. So time is kind of the biggest struggle for me. But other than that, I've really enjoyed the experience. I've had great support at the college. The advisors have been really awesome, and same with the teachers. They've been really supportive. So my experience so far has been great.
Thanks, Ashley, and welcome to the call. Now that we've talked a little bit about the challenges and barriers, let's talk about the positives. What are kind of some of the resources and programming that adults can take advantage of when they want to come back? Kind of where's those positive things that they can kind of get assistance with?
Can I start on this one?
Sure.
So we have Minnesota State and Office of Higher Ed have partnered together to create Minnesota Reconnect. And this is really a program specifically for the adult learners that started and maybe stopped out for, well, they did stop out for whatever reason. And so it's geared for those students that are 25 and above. Right now, we're asking them to have completed at least 15 credits, but if they earned like a nursing assistant certificate, that's okay, because they can, this is a stackable credential that they could build on. But if they have any other type of credential that's higher than that, this program really isn't designed for them. So it's for the students that have started, haven't finished a credential, and it does have fabulous advisors like Amy Wagner, and that very focused and customized advisor that looks at a holistic approach. So they're looking at the entire student. And so they're working with them not only on their academic needs, but that re-enrollment need and helping them with applying for financial aid. And there is some scholarship funding. So each student that is in Minnesota Reconnect is possibly eligible for $1,000 per semester up to 6 semesters. So that's a pretty large amount, and it's not based on Pell eligibility. So it has a broader reach for many of our adult learners. Like I talked about at the beginning, that cost of education is really tricky. So it's a wonderful program. I know we don't have a ton of time for me to go into it, but you know, it's designed for students. There's even funding to help students if they have past debt, because again, a lot of times if a student starts and they're 18, 19, they maybe don't have that financial stability or just the wherewithal of how do student loans work and how do you know, credits and withdrawal timeframes work and things like that. And what's the ramification if I, you know, just stop going to class midway? How is this going to impact me financially? So a lot of times students want to come back, but they have a financial hold that is a barrier for them. So there's even financial dollars to help those students alleviate that financial debt as well. So Minnesota Reconnect, it's fabulous. I can get you more information if you need it. And I'm sure that our information will be shared so you can reach out to me directly.
Thanks, Shelley. Do you want to talk about Mid-State Workforce Development Scholarships too and prior learning?
Oh, well, I didn't want to take up the whole show, but yes, we also at 30, Minnesota Reconnect is only at 9 of our institutions, but at all 30 of our state colleges, we have the Minnesota Workforce Development Grant, which is designed for students of any age, so 18 adults coming into those high demand, high wage programs. So there's 6 different identified fields, and they're like technology and healthcare. So it's a scholarship program, again, getting additional funding for the students in these programs. So it's on top of their Minnesota State grant, it's on top of their federal award and anything like that. So that's exciting. And again, that's at all 30 of our colleges. And prior learning, yes, this is something that is wonderful for adults. Prior learning assessment, credit for prior learning. Adults bring a wealth of knowledge when they're coming to campus. And so if I started college when I was 18 and I earned, you know, 6 credits, but now I'm 40 and I've been working, you know, for those, you know, 20 years, although my math is probably really not working. During those 20 years, I gained a lot of knowledge. I may have been working as a business associate, and so I have accounting credits or, you know, just customer service credits, things like that. Credit for prior learning is where students can get credit for their knowledge, credit for their skills, credit for some of those industry-based certificates. All of that kind of falls under the umbrella of credit for prior learning or prior learning assessments. And so whenever adult learners are reaching out to campuses, we're trying to get this more of a regular part of the re-enrollment process or the admissions process initially if it's an adult learner who's never started college previously, so that students really do have access to all of the different options for them to obtain credits. And if they're able to come on board and have an additional, you know, 2 classes under their belt that they A, don't have to pay for, and B, they don't have to spend time doing, that helps them get to the end even faster. So all of the campuses have resources and people available to help them with that. Not every campus or every college is offering credit for prior learning and things like that, but it is something that system-wide we are really hoping that we can beef up and have available at more of our institutions.
Thanks, Shelley. And we should note that prior learning assessment and credit for prior learning occurs at many institutions, not just Minnesota State. Rasmussen does it. There's a number of colleges that actually do it, but not every college does. Yeah. So thank you for setting that basis. What would you add to the list? What would anyone else add to the list? Go ahead.
I kind of wanted to go off of what Shelley was saying. There's a transfer pathway programs that are offered. I know like the Minnesota State colleges do it. So I started in the fall of 2019 as a paralegal student. And one of the first things that I learned was that you don't need a paralegal degree to be a paralegal. So I was like, what am I doing? So then I became a political science transfer major. So when I transfer to Minnesota State University Moorhead next fall, I'll already be over halfway done with my bachelor's degree because every single class that I take will get transferred over as long as I stay within the Minnesota state system. So that's not a program that's specific to adult learners, but it's going to help, you know, save me thousands and thousands of dollars and 2 years of my time. So I think that's a very, very valuable program that's available and that can be very helpful to adults and I guess students of all ages.
Thanks, Amanda. And I do think what that hits on is that colleges that have a way of structuring classes and structuring scheduling to facilitate adults completing it, that is a really kind of cool program offering. And so how do you make that pathway predictable? How do you let students know what classes they're going to be taking and when? Yeah. All right. Amy, Ashley, Brooks, or Cindy, what would you add?
Yeah, I would add, first of all, I think, you know, PLA, transfer, and competency-based education are three big ones. We've talked about those. What I would add, two things. First, test preparation for incoming adult learners. So as you're preparing for those entrance placement exams that are going to put you either into college level math or English or remediation, to the extent that institutions can, and Rasmussen does this, free test prep for learners. This is especially helpful for adult learners who haven't done an equation in 10 years or haven't dissected a sentence in 15 years, right? This is not like riding a bike. And so if you can provide free test prep, even if it's videos, just to kind of brush away those cobwebs before they take the high stakes test, that can go a long way toward reducing debt and speeding time to graduation. So I would say free test preparation for incoming students. And then the second thing I would say is mobile readiness. So going back to the earlier comment about bandwidth restraints in people's homes, especially in urban and rural areas, Rasmussen right now is in the middle of making sure that all of our courses are mobile ready. So you can still do them on laptops or desktops, but all the content and faculty can be accessed by tablets and by phones as well. And that helps bandwidth, that helps access, and it gives even more time and place flexibility to learners. So I think mobile readiness is going to be a big one in the future as well.
Thanks, Brooks.
I'll go. I would say that there are support services on campuses to help adult learners and all learners. There's, especially even with COVID, we've expanded our ability to virtually support students. There's 24/7 tutoring available. There's also peer tutoring available, where you schedule times that work for you and your peer tutor to meet, or you're getting tutoring help in the middle of the night because that's when your kids are finally to bed and the dishes are done and you're able to work on whatever it is, work on your own schoolwork. Access to disability services, writing center, technology support, all of those things that are in place to help a student succeed, making sure that our adult learners know about those resources and connecting those dots for them is really important for their success.
Amy, could you maybe expand a little bit? Because you're a Minnesota Reconnect navigator. So kind of that dedicated advising role. Can you talk about what it means for students to have like a dedicated point of contact at a college?
Well, one thing about Riverland is that we do have an assigned advisor model where we have an advisor that's assigned a certain number of students. Usually we're kind of divided up by the subject area. With Minnesota Reconnect, I'm a dedicated advisor to the students in the Minnesota Reconnect program. It doesn't matter what their major is, but I have a smaller caseload than the other advisors as the navigator so that I am more accessible to the students. I have more experience in transfer things for them. I'm really able to get into their individual issues and try to troubleshoot for them and help them in whatever their barriers or issues are that are specific to them. They're not just part of, oh, just this big number of students to me. We kind of get more close and we have more of a relationship where they can contact me and do contact me for things that they have questions about that maybe aren't even necessarily related to Minnesota Reconnect.
Thanks, Amy. All right, Ashley and Cindy, kind of from your perspective, what do you think are kind of the big supports that have helped you? Or what would you highlight?
For myself, I would say, first of all, starting with the advisors, they've really helped me like lay out the path to where I need to go, and help me with the transfer classes to make sure that I'm taking the right courses at the right times. I've also took advantage of the tutoring at the college, which was helpful. And there's just so many resources that Riverland gives to us that we can take advantage of to kind of help us if we're struggling with class, or if it's been forever since we've done math or English or anything like that. There's been a lot of help and resources that are available for me to use. And I think that's kind of been the two main things, is the advisor and all the resources.
Thanks, Ashley. Cindy?
I'm going to go through the emotional path that Riverland has laid out for us. The student body and student services have really helped we have yoga on Zoom that we can go into, which I think is wonderful. It's giving us an ability that even I've put it on and my kids have joined in. And it's an activity that the Riverland is doing for us. And just being able to take advantage of it. And also there's other smaller things. I know that they send out either on the social media page or in our weeklies, as far as like there's a stress ball thing that we can pick up in student services when we go see our advisors, you know, and they're little kits that they give us that we can go home and do with our children, do on our own, help us, you know, find that one little thing that helps us de-stress, that can make us help refocus on it, you know. And it's having that ability to just have that through the college, which is wonderful to even have that support emotionally and mentally as well. And yeah, being able to have that 24-hour service of tutoring, because I know not being able to be in person has been an issue, because, you know, trying to focus sometimes it's just that much harder, but being able to get on the Zoom call with somebody at like 1 o'clock in the morning, when that's when I have the time, has really been the difference.
Thanks, Cindy. I do kind of just, I feel like I almost want to add a disclaimer, by the way, that I work with Minnesota Reconnect, so as do two other staff on this call. So just a disclaimer about our conflict of interest. But I do want to reiterate that in terms of at least some of the Office of Higher Education programs, that we should just note that Minnesota State grants and Pell grants are available to adult learners. Minnesota has a post-secondary child care grant where you can receive funding to assist you in paying for child care. We have the Pipeline Dual Training Grant, which works with individuals who may be working full-time or part-time to go through their employer to help offer training if they're looking to skill up. And what am I missing, you guys, in the financial aid world? There's the Minnesota GI Bill, there's a number of financial aid programs that adults have access to, even if you're enrolling part-time. So that's kind of the cool part about Minnesota. Amy, you did mention that student parent centers, right? We didn't really talk about those. Do you want to talk a minute?
Right. Colleges have varying degrees of support for student parents. At one point, Riverland had an actual center that was staffed full-time, and because it had a grant that was supplying resources, students would participate in activities, and then they would earn points, and they'd get things like gas cards, and there was food and that kind of thing. So when the grant went away, we did not want to lose the support that we were trying to provide for students. So we turned it into more of a student activity and a student club, and I am the advisor for that. And so we don't have a program per se where students can get financial resources, but we try to run contests and have opportunities for students to interact with us, interface with us, and then we provide things. I have internal grants that we can give them, like $25 gift cards for gas or food or that type of thing. We also have been trying to set up support for peers, just for an opportunity for students who are parents to be able to get together and to network and to talk about what their common issues are and look for resolutions. And then other part of our programming that we do is to try to have subject matter experts come in to provide resources. We've had some trouble because of COVID, because one, students aren't on campus at the level that they were. So now we've tried to put everything into a Zoom environment, but you know, it's just really hard for students to log into one more Zoom thing. So I'm looking forward to when we have a chance to have more of a physical presence for our parent group. But between networking with peers and then also, like, for instance, we just had our last topic last month for our Lunch and Learn was Love and Learn speaker. We've had someone from a parenting resource center come in and talk about what kind of parent are you, what are your parenting styles. Those are the types of things that we're trying to provide and support with for students who are parents. We do have daycare on our Austin campus, but it's not specifically affiliated with Riverland. But at least there's kind of some continuity as far as if you can have your child go to that daycare, then you're just that much closer to campus. I think food insecurity is a huge thing for a lot of students, no matter their age, and think about student parents and having to provide for their own food for themselves and their children. So Riverland has a pretty robust free food pantry program. And Cindy, who's the president of our student parent club, and I have been trying to organize kind of a children's clothing swap entity so that people can donate clothing for children and then students can come in and get clothing for their children. She did kind of a similar free market rummage sale with her Human Services Club earlier this year. So she knows all of the rules about how long donations have to sit before you can touch them and how much space you have to have between everything. So we're looking forward to next semester trying to get that off the ground and do it safely and provide that resource for students.
Thanks, Amy. That's really great, because I think sometimes we think about college or assistance for adult learners being academic or financial aid or some of the more traditional college supports. But you guys work a lot with adults who may not have finished their high school diploma or GED, right? Through Adult Basic Ed, you may have worked with individuals who laid off and they're coming through workforce centers, right? Or they may need food stamp assistance or other kind of human service program public benefits, right? So how do we kind of engage with those adults or displaced or those adults needing other types of assistance that the college hasn't traditionally been the source of? How do you guys kind of manage that? Like, how do you kind of work with our partners at like County Human Services or workforce centers or Adult Basic Ed?
Well, it's all about the relationships and the network that you provide. We do actually have Adult Basic Ed on our campuses, as well as workforce development centers on our campuses, so that we can have some continuity of the services that those organizations provide. We've started doing some courses this year where they're co-taught between Adult Basic Ed and Riverland Prep teachers. So the first part of the semester is their kind of pre-prep English course. The second part is the first level of prep English, you know, as Brooks mentioned, for the students who need to kind of get back into going back to college and need to brush up on those skills. So they co-teach together, they co-tutor together. They have a special study lab that they use, and we're doing that for math and for English. We have counseling services that can provide personal counseling and that also maintain relationships to other social entities. And we have disability services that also has connections to other local and community resources. So there's so much out there. We just need to, you have to just really focus on how can you kind of bundle those things together and make them accessible to students when they need it.
Thanks, Amy. What would our other panelists add in that regard? What about the connections to the world outside the college and the possible resources and assistance that are available?
I'd just like to add a little more to what Amy has to say. I also think Riverland gives the opportunity to a lot of the advisors and staff and instructors also gives the ability to use their own network. They allow it to be student driven as well, but I kind of say, hey, this is maybe you want to go and speak with these people. We've, had this network already kind of set up, but we'll let you do that. So that way, when we are graduating or just about to have that opportunity to finish schooling, we have built our own network with those outside resources ourselves so that when we step out, we're not just kind of out in the wind of, well, I don't know where I'm going or I don't know who to reach out to. Riverland has really been an advocate in that kind of sense of, if I know if I'm not, the instructors can say, if I don't have that resource, I know this staff member does or this advisor does, let's work with them and I'll introduce you and we can take it step by step and do so. And I think Riverland has done a great job in that sense.
Thanks, Cindy. Others?
I was just going to say that M-State has done a really good job during the pandemic at helping students get connected with like emergency grants and programs that could help them throughout this time. We did a technology event where the campuses gave away a combined 500 laptops to students who qualified. They've also they received CARE grants as well, which they're offering to students by request in the form of the FSEO grants, I believe. The student grants and stuff like that. So just giving out information that is helpful along those lines for helping with situations, especially during the COVID. I just have to say that's one thing as well. And I think it was Amy was talking about childcare. Our local campus has in the past worked with our local community action to provide on-site daycare for our campus because there is a daycare on-site. And then it used to be that some of the students in like the early childhood education programs would actually gain their experience working with children by working in the daycare. So it was kind of a nice way to incorporate members of the community and then other children and families as well with the campus that might not have necessarily had childcare available to them or have been able to afford it. So that's nice as well. And then just having like the adult basic education available on campus is helpful as well because say you take an assessment test and the acupuncture and you may have to take a math class that isn't covered by financial aid. And that in itself could be enough to derail you from going back to school. So you're able to go on in the same building in a sense and get help with that so that you're able to maybe retest next month and you save yourself 3 credits worth. So I think that's been helpful.
Thanks, Amanda. And we should just mention that many people don't know that adult basic education now offers an adult diploma. So you don't have to take the GED in Minnesota anymore. There's actually an alternative available for adults that is integrated with adult basic ed, which hopefully will make access and completion of that high school credential that is needed for often employment in college more accessible. Ashley, Brooks, what would you, Shelley, anything you would add to that?
Well, one thing I was going to mention that I forgot, Meredith, is we also have community ed on our campus as well, and they're working with English language learners, and so they're doing some of that preliminary work, and then those students are able to then go into our English second language courses that we have, which then prepare them to be into the mainstream classes at the college. So that's another audience that we're able to connect the resources from the community to what we're doing to help them get the student further into the college experience. and towards degree completion.
Thanks, Amy.
And I'll say really briefly, employer partnerships. I think when colleges and universities can partner with employers, it can help learners on a lot of different levels, from tuition reimbursement. Meredith, you mentioned upskilling, sometimes placement after graduation. There are a lot of different opportunities that can help students when colleges and universities partner with employers in the community.
Thanks. All right. So we did get a question in the chat to kind of in regards to this question. Specifically, what about veterans or Black, Indigenous persons of color? Kind of what should we be thinking about in terms of serving those groups as adult learners? Is there anything you'd highlight? Challenges, barriers, resources, perspectives?
I was in the Air Force for 9 years, so I am a student veteran, and we have our own veteran person that specifically helped me out with enrolling into the course, and also providing the resources in the community as well that we have the opportunity to use. So just knowing, having that information and knowing who those people are to contact is a big thing. Sometimes we're brand new to Minnesota, so it took me a little bit of research to find the people that I needed to talk to, but I did find them, and they have been a great help for my college education.
I would second what Ashley says. As just said, I am a spouse of military, and I know that we had to speak with some people and try to figure things out when we were just transferring some of the credits that my husband had, as far as like with the GI Bill and things like that. So having that on campus and not having to worry too much of trying to find somewhere outside really did help.
And I would just note, I just want to give a shout out to Minnesota State with regards to veterans issues, because Minnesota State is seen as a national leader in facilitating enrollment of veterans post enlistment. And so they really should be congratulated for setting that up. So they frequently go to other states to talk about how they did it. So that's kind of cool for us here in Minnesota. All right.
I just wanted to add that M-State also has a president's club for a committee for equity and inclusion. So we do meet fairly regularly to try and discuss issues that are ongoing in our community as well as other communities, to try and make sure that, you know, I speak for many people with being working with college attainment, basically, like making sure that everyone has access regardless of their abilities or, you know, their race or where they live, stuff like that.
And I'll say from an institutional standpoint, I think it's always important for an institution to take a look in the mirror and kind of take stock of what kind of experience you're offering to different demographic groups, including race and ethnicity. So could be veterans, could be first gen, and any number of race and ethnicities that you have populating your classrooms. And a shout out to Mohi on this one too. We did a training you all brought in, I think it was the Center for Urban Education a few years ago from USC. And we attended that and learned a great deal about how to kind of self-audit for equity opportunities, challenges, strengths, from the moment a student expresses interest in your institution all the way through the classroom experience. There are a lot of really good tools out there to self-assess how you're doing to support diverse learners.
Thanks, Brooks. And I just want to mention that training was offered by Estella Ben-Simone out of the Center for Urban Education. And I think she's at USC, right? The University of Southern California. Yeah. So cool.
That's correct. Yep.
Thanks for remembering that. Yeah, exciting. All right, we have approximately 5 minutes left in our conversation. And so there are a number of questions in the chat, such as, you know, and I'm going to give you your choice. Activities, fitting activities among student responsibilities, academic responsibilities, and families. How do you make it worth it? We also have, how do we serve immigrant students, and where do I find more information? Anyone want to take a hit at any of those three questions?
I think
How do you make it worth it? Oh, sorry, Brooks. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. I mean, really briefly on the how do you make it worth it is the big question, right? And I think in short, it's really about quality and outcomes. So you want to make sure that the students have the learning outcomes and the employment outcomes that they're looking for. I mean, I still, you know, it's important to balance return on investment for the student with an educational experience, right? College is more than just job training. But there has to be a return on investment at the end. And so I think sticking to a quality classroom experience, a quality support experience, but then those outcomes at the end, I mean, that's how you make sure it's worth it.
I like that theme. Where else would you guys go? How do you make it worth it? Especially Ashley, Cindy, and Amanda. Why do you do it? It's a lot of work managing all this. What's that big benefit for you, that goal you're aiming for?
For myself, it's just the career path. I've always wanted to do sonography, and that's kind of what I'm getting into now. And just knowing that I'm on the path towards success for that and to eventually go to the career that I've ultimately wanted to do. That's kind of what keeps me driven. And also for my children, that's also a driving factor to help me get through the college and everything.
Thanks, Ashley. Cindy or Amanda?
I always wanted to be a civil rights attorney. I always wanted to stand up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. So I think that it was really hard for me to take the time for myself and remind myself that even though I'm a parent and I'm an older student, that my input matters. That just because you once you get past a certain age, what you have to say in your community, it matters. And I just think remembering that you're not alone in this is definitely worth it. Try and join an activity. You never know. Join your student leadership association. Worst case scenario is you meet some people that you might not have ran into or that you might not have seen on campus, especially with everything being digital right now. Now is the time to try and do something that you might not have done and step outside of your comfort zone. And I think just that in itself can help make it worth it for you.
Thanks, Amanda. Cindy, is there anything you want to add?
And I would second what Amanda had to say about joining something. I know my very first semester, I was like going straight to class as soon as class was done, heading to my car, going home, and not worrying about anything else that was on campus, anything that had to be offered. And the minute I started to get involved with DEEDS, which is the Human Service Program, Phi Theta Kappa, the Student Parent Club, it made, I know it was, you know, an hour here, an extra 3 hours in total a week, but it made a huge difference in networking, meeting the people that I did, the staff itself, and being able to network from every perspective, and getting just an idea of who else was in class with me, and getting to know that diversity, which opened up many more doors than just entering a class, getting the education, and leaving.
Thanks, Cindy. Well, Amy and Shelley, we're out of time, but is there anything you want to wrap up in like 10 seconds before I turn it back over to Marcio?
I would say that there are I think there's been other calls, engagement calls regarding services for Indigenous people and immigrants and those types of things. So it's not that there aren't a host of different support services that are available. And there's definitely a commitment from the system office and each college and closing the equity gap and providing services specifically for students that may be like for adult learners. There are also ways to support students of diversity as well. So I know that we haven't had time to really kind of talk about all of that, but I believe that Shelley put in the chat a link to some of the equity commitment and I think possibly programming too that Men's State offers. So I didn't want to ignore those questions related to that because those are hugely important to us.
Yeah. And we should know that for immigrant students, the International Institute and especially their Minnesota College Readiness Academy is a good place to start too. But we can share some additional resources online after the chat. But I do want to thank all our panelists for joining us today. You guys are wonderful. And I have to tell you, you're the reason that I keep working in this area because it's so much fun because the payoff is so amazing. And so thank you all for joining us today. I'm going to turn it back over to Marcio, who's going to close us out. Marcio.
Hey, thanks a lot, Meredith. I just want to say how much we appreciate you, Meredith, for moderating the call today and keeping the conversation going. You've done a fantastic job. Of course, we didn't expect anything less. You're definitely one of the rock stars of our agency. I want to thank Deputy Commissioner Winnie Sullivan for jumping on the call and opening the call with us today. Definitely want to thank our panelists, Shelley, Brooks, Amanda, Amy, Cindy, and Ashley for joining us and just sharing your personal and authentic information with all the attendees on the call today. So thank you for taking the time out to share with us today, and we definitely appreciate it. Once again, this call is recorded, and we will be sending out the recording to all the attendees as well. And just want to give a plug for the continuation of our public engagement calls. We will continue to do these calls in 2021. We are scheduling a call in January, and we haven't decided on a date yet, but the time will remain the same. But our next call will be in January 2021, and we will be discussing the attainment goal for Minnesota. So if you want to be a part of that call, just make sure you look for that email coming out around the first week or so in January. And we appreciate all the time that all the attendees have taken to join us on each of these calls. We hope that the information has been valuable. We appreciate your time, and we want to give you be respectful of your time today by giving you a couple of minutes back so you can go on with the rest of your day. So once again, appreciate everyone on behalf of the Office of Higher Education and Dennis Olson, our commissioner, and our Deputy Commissioner, Winnie Sullivan. Thank you for your time, and we'll see you in 2021.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you so
everyone.
much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.